This never happened to the other fella.
Just trying out something different. This is a sponsored video. I'm not going to always do that, but it's going to help support the channel. Today's video is brought to you by Audible. Use my link audible.com/Rossatron or text Rossatron to 500 500 to get a free book and 30-day free trial today. It would be easy to make a list of what I consider to be the best Bond films, but I don't want to do that. There are enough of those around. Quickly, my favourites in no real order are Goldfinger, The Spy Who Loved Me, GoldenEye, Casino Royale, and I've got a surprising soft spot for the Dalton Bonds, though perhaps they work better as independent dark spy thrillers. Oh, and I really, really like On Her Majesty's Secret Service. So there you go. What do I like so much about On Her Majesty's Secret Service? Starring George Lazenby, often considered the least favourite of the actors picked to portray the secret agent, I've actually come to really love On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and I've noticed its stature grow in recent years. Steven Soderbergh even calls it the only Bond film worth rewatching. I grew up with Bond. Like any British person, it was a staple of our household. But I'll admit that a lot of them, maybe most of them, aren't really all that good. They're often overlong and cheesy, and as time has gone on, as much as Bond has evolved, he's also remained stuck in the past in some ways. By the way, I know what this is going to do, but this is where I start talking about some stuff some are going to call PC gone mad or social justice, etc. I believe in it, and if you think it doesn't belong in action films, take a moment and look at the films I love, and how enthusiastically I speak about them, and that I still have these views. Loving action films and wanting a more diverse, inclusive future are not mutually exclusive. You can disagree with me on this is just my opinion in the end.
Good night, Mr. Bond.
Bond has always been a bit of a roguish scamp, but his chauvinistic ways sometimes move from cheeky to, for me, really quite questionable, which, whilst potentially understandable in a film like 1963's Goldfinger, are less so in Skyfall, a film that came out in 2012 and yet features Bond sneaking up on a clearly traumatized child abuse victim in the shower.
Tattoo on your wrist is Macau sex trade. You belong to one of the houses. What were you, 12?
5 minutes of screen time after meeting her. I know some celebrate these aspects of his character, but it never sits right for me. Especially when you realise, for example, the some would say hilariously sexist Connery Bond is played by a guy that advocates men being able to hit their wives.
You did an interview in which you said, it's not the worst thing to slap a woman now and then. As I remember, you said you don't do it with a clenched fist, it's better to do it with an open hand. Yeah, remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I didn't love that.
I haven't changed my opinion.
I understand that Connery was not the character and vice versa, and others were involved in Bond's creation, but for me, knowing this attitude was so rigid in the one who arguably, apart from Ian Fleming, most represented Bond, makes enjoying his supposed old-school sexism very difficult for me. Again, this is my opinion. I'm not disregarding Bond, just giving context for how I sometimes feel about the character.
What do you say to that?
It's a waste of good scotch.
What On Her Majesty's brings, though, arguably, is a slight character change that makes him at least, if anything, a little more interesting throughout the rest of the series. It tried to do something a little bit different. For example, if anything, he finds a misunderstood person, and as one himself, grows to see something in her that he can't help but want and respect. I like that.
James.
First of all, throughout the film, we see Diana Rigg as in many ways an equal to Bond. Not in terms of her being another Jinx-style female Bond clone, but someone he connects with on a genuine level. She can handle herself for a start, which for the time was to be lauded. She's fascinating to Bond, before quickly but believably becoming someone he respects and loves. Now, some spoilers for a film that came out in 1969. At the closing moments of this film, probably one of the best drawn Bond girls, one given strength, is killed. Now that's not new for the series, sadly that happens in pretty much every film. But here, it's the second Bond girl, and it's a short, brutal moment that leaves Bond broken.
It's all right. It's quite all right, really. She's having a rest.
Then, the film ends. The one woman he has truly fallen in love with, that he's fully given himself to emotionally, and actually married, is taken. And then that's just it. There's no revenge, no quips, just a man realizing probably that thanks to the life he has chosen, he will never be truly happy and those around him will never be safe. The sensitivity portrayed here in Bond, that very rarely seen affected Bond, hasn't often been visited again. Sure, he's been angry, and recently Vesper's death caused an almost similar response in Craig's version of the character, but never quite to the level of real emotional rawness we see here. He also always gets some sort of catharsis. Here, he just gains, if anything, further cynicism.
You have all the time in the world.
Now, taking this into account, could Bond be more withdrawn from this point onward into the other films? Harder to break through to, because of how much this affected him. It's an example of a film in a franchise adding a context to the others that, for me, improves them. I'm not saying I don't anymore take issue with what Bond is as a character, but that arguably, at least when viewed post On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the character is inherently a deeper, more layered figure. It's a stretch, but for me, it's there. Everything he does after this kind of feels inherently sad in some way, especially in terms of his relationships. It has been touched upon later too. He visits her grave in For Your Eyes Only. Dalton's Bond, who is harder edged than the rest, is still affected by it.
Is there something wrong?
He was married once, but it was a long time ago.
Clearly the filmmakers here saw this moment as an important one for the character. And for those that feel it can only work as a cynical chauvinist, I completely disagree based on what I've discussed here. In conclusion, though I do not for a moment want to excuse the character's continually problematic history, I do think there is something interesting, though rarely discussed, in terms of a moment Bond was allowed to be something other than his usual self, and how that moment could perhaps add texture to his attitude in later films, whilst again not excusing his actions within them. It's an example of this film adding context to the others that for me improves them. Of course, On Her Majesty's Secret Service has some of the same issues many of the earlier Bonds do, but it was the 60s, I can't deny that. And he is still kind of ahead of his time here again. When told Tracy needs to be married off, Bond pushes against that idea a bit.
I find her fascinating, but she needs a psychiatrist, not me.
What she needs is a man.
The producers seem to think that Bond only works when he's shown as thinking less of women, in a way. But Her Majesty's proves that that doesn't always have to be the case. And beyond that though, On Her Majesty's Secret Service is just a fantastic film. Sure, it is pretty overlong, and the process shots have not at all aged well, but the action is very well done, at least for the time, and clearly influenced Christopher Nolan. It's helped by the genuine physicality of Lazenby, and Telly Savalas' less theatrical, more grounded version of Blofeld. And the whole thing is supported by a tremendous score from John Barry, probably the best in the series. For me in some ways, by its clear influence on other leading filmmakers, this is in a way the director's Bond. It is a gorgeous looking film, a supremely well-crafted thriller, and is one where the hand of the director can really be felt, especially in that powerful performance that for many feels so not Bond. Check out On Her Majesty's Secret Service if you haven't already, if only to gain a new depth to Bond's character, and of course to really just see one of the better, if less talked about, films of the series. I want to thank Audible for helping make this video possible. I listened to On Her Majesty's Secret Service while preparing for this episode, and if you use my link audible.com/Rossatron or text Rossatron to 500 you can get a free copy of it or any audiobook of your choosing, and a 30-day free trial of the service. That's plenty of time to listen to the book read so masterfully by David Tennant. As a professional editor by day and running this channel by night, being able to listen on the bus to work and whilst going to shops really helped it fit into my research. Audible has an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy and more. If you haven't read Ian Fleming's original Bond work, I recommend checking out the vast selection on Audible. Audible members get one free audiobook a month, exclusive sales, and 30% off all regularly priced audiobooks. If you do want to check it out, use my link, audible.com/Rossatron, or text Rossatron to 500 to get a free book and that 30-day free trial.